to tee up Evan for some of the grisly discoveries of this week's film review from the Patriots 49ers debacle in Foxborough on Sunday. And Tuesday is usually the day, Evan, where you have poured through the coach's film and you've gotten to see in a bit more detail what we all saw on Sunday. And really, it wasn't that much more revealing than the game itself was, but it was as bad as everybody was saying, and as you were saying right after the game.
Well, I mean, the offense right now is completely inept at passing the football. They can still run the ball, which is nice, but they're currently 30th in EPA per dropback, 27th in Football Outsiders DVOA metric as a pass offense. I mean, just basically any statistic you want to use. They have the most interceptions in the league. They have the fewest passes of 20-plus yards. I can keep going and going. Like they're literally in the bottom 5 category in any production stat on the offensive side of the ball through the air. And I think when you see that, it's not just one thing, but I think a main reason why is that the timing, the anticipation, the knowing where his answers are into the coverage for Cam Newton right now is an utter mess. And when you don't have receivers that are creating tons and tons of separation or winning one-on-one battles all over the place, you got to hit the easy ones. You got to hit the layups. And right now that they're not producing on those types of plays.
So, and again, a lot of this stuff was pointed out, and a lot of the stuff you could see just on the regular game broadcast and in some replays, receivers flashing open and Newton not hitting them, being a little late on some throws, and just lack of recognition. Newton keeps saying after the games, he feels like he's pressing. Now, how much here do you think is Newton looking for a bigger play than what's available? Because a lot of what you have in the Patriots offense is take what's there. If you have the 4 or 5 yard gain, sometimes take it, and you got to recognize it and take it quick, or else it's going to be gone. There were some plays where you would see 2 and 3 players open in a position where they could possibly even make some yards after the catch, and Newton's just either just looking at them or holding onto the ball and not looking at them at all, and with his eyes downfield. How much of that did you see, where he's just opting not to go with the thing that's right in front of him?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a little bit of that, of just taking what the defense gives you and just checking the ball down or being willing to check the ball down. But I think more worrisome than that, I would say, is a lack of aggressiveness down the field. He's kind of locking on right now to his first read in the progression. He's never really getting off that first read, and he's staring it down. And then by the time he gets to second read or the check down option in the progression, everything is already on top of each other at that point, because it's been 3 seconds, 3.1 seconds. His average time to throw on Sunday was 3.13 seconds. I mean, I can't remember any time that Tom Brady's average time to throw was over 2.8 or 2.85 seconds, let alone all the way over 3 like that. And it's not because Newton was scrambling around and making plays like he's Russell Wilson or Patrick Mahomes. It's because he's not reading the field quickly enough. And I think in this offense, and really any offense, I think it's a little bit over-exaggerated that the Patriots offense is so predicated on timing. All offenses are predicated on timing.
It's open, then it's not open.
Right.
I mean, that's it,
And then the issue is that some quarterbacks, like a Russell Wilson or a Patrick Mahomes, can then create what we would call outside of structure, right? So they don't see the initial guy come open, or there's no play initially as the part of the design of the route pattern. And then what happens is once the scramble drill happens, those types of players are really good at creating plays down the field in scramble drill mode. And Cam isn't really that type of scrambler or that type of mobile quarterback. So really, again, what it comes down to is nobody's sitting here saying, why isn't Cam making big time throws down the field? Why doesn't he have these, why isn't he throwing darts? Why isn't he throwing dimes down the field to Damian Bird and N'Keal Harry? Nobody's expecting him to do that, folks. People are expecting him to make the layups. That's the ones that we were asking him to make is, get through a progression and hit a check down receiver, or that throw to Damian Bird on that over route coming across very early on in the game on Sunday. He just sat there and he patted the ball and he patted the ball. And then eventually, once he started winding up, there was a defender at his feet putting pressure on him, and the ball sailed over Damiere Byrd's head because of the pressure. Now, they got a flag for roughing the passer, but you still look at the process from the quarterback is not good on that particular play. And then finally, I think what really sums it all up is that the Patriots finally in week 7 got back to running some Hossie juke, which is like their favorite go-to concept. It's day one install type
Twitter
of
was
stuff.
clamoring for it.
Right. It's been 20 years of Hossie juke here in New England, or Hoss Y juke, as some people might hear it when it's a Y instead of Edelman, when it was like Aaron Hernandez running the juke route instead of Wes Welker or Julian Edelman. So regardless, they ran that play 3 times, 0 completions, 1 interception on Haas to Edelman late in the game. And that type of optionality system, Cam is not reading the field fast enough. He's just not getting to his points fast enough. I actually didn't mind the fact that he came off Harry on that one, that screenshot that's kind of circled around where Harry comes open on the post. Because it was quarters, I could understand why he worked the one-on-one matchup with Edelman isolated on the linebacker. But on the second time with Haas, with the interception to Edelman, he's reading single high. He knows it's single high, so he works the seam. He gets stuck on the seam, and instead of going seam to hitch, which is what you're supposed to do, he goes seam to juke, and he throws an interception. So I just think that he doesn't really understand right now fully. He's not comfortable with what they're asking him to run. So to me, what it comes down to is that he needs to sit down with Josh McDaniels and Jed Fish and even Bill Belichick, and they need to say, okay, Cam, give us the 10 passing concepts in our playbook that you're comfortable with running, that you know the progression read, you understand where the ball should go based off the coverage, and you feel good about it. You practiced it well, and then you can play it well in the game. Give us the 5 to 10 concepts, and they're just going to have to stick to that grouping, because right now, all the different types of option routes, all the different types of things that they want to run in the berth that they want to use in their playbook, it's overwhelming him at this point, I think.
Well, I want to get to McDaniels and the coaching in a minute, but the other thing we've talked about with Newton is mechanics and whether or not there's regression. And again, during the Denver game, there obviously was, and we attributed a lot of that to not having a week of practice. And Newton's a person who needs that practice and those reps to make sure he doesn't lapse back into bad habits. But it seemed like a lot of those were there again on Sunday. So this is another thing we have to contend with. And again, I think people have to get used to just the fact of Newton, which is even at his best, he's not an exceedingly accurate passer. So he has to have perfect mechanics just to get to 60% completions pretty much. Or maybe in a Patriots system, if he's reading things better, that number can go up because you've got more passes that you can hit on with more frequency. But how troubling is that he has slid back into that so quickly after seemingly having gotten past it early in the year?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with the mechanical stuff is it's like any sort of sport with repetition involved, a baseball swing, a golf swing, a free throw shooter, anything like that. It's all about repetition. It's doing it the same over and over and over again. And what I think ended up happening there, this is the one aspect of it to me that you can sort of blame on him contracting the coronavirus. And that is what happened there. He kind of lost that momentum, right? All off season, all training camp, all preseason practices, all that kind of stuff. Jed Fish, McDaniels, they're drilling it into him, step 1 foot front of the other, shoulders level, don't have the backwards tilt, make sure you're stepping towards your target and following through and transitioning your weight and not locking your front leg out, and all that type of stuff. That's just these little mechanical things that allow a quarterback to generate velocity and accuracy down the field. And Cam, unfortunately, has gone off the rails with that, I think, because he's lost that continuous repetition day in and day out. So they can build that back up, I think. And I think they will at some point get back to where he was in weeks 1 and 2, where he was throwing with much better mechanics. And you could see the hard work paying off for him. Unfortunately, he got unlucky, and then the whole coronavirus thing really threw him off the rails. And that's where we're at with that. Way too often throwing with his feet parallel to the line of scrimmage. That's all arm, right? He's just trying to throw the ball with his arm at that point. He's not generating anything from his lower body or from his core, and that's why the ball is getting thrown short, or the ball placement is off, or whatever the case may be on any particular throw. So he's never been a mechanically sound thrower. That's why usually in Carolina there's a lot of high volume in terms of deep passes going on. So hey, like, you know, he's probably not going to hit 60% of his deep passes, but if he hits 30% and we're throwing a bunch of them, then that's a couple of big plays a game. So who cares at that point? So maybe that's what the Patriots need to do. But I just really feel like he was never a consistent thrower. You can't expect him to be a consistent thrower, but he's got to make the easy ones.
Well, I mean, look, and again, this is the dilemma with the Patriots is, yeah, it absolutely would make sense to chuck a few balls downfield, see if you can win some 50-50 balls, draw a penalty, get somebody open. You hit a lower percentage of those, it's going to be better for your offense because they've not generated any splash plays. But the question is, to whom do you throw those balls? And right now, I don't know who that is. You got, his one deep ball attempt last game was to Jacoby Myers and his 4.78 40 down the middle of the field. So again, you don't really have a lot of capable people there. Before we put a pin in Newton, because again, he's drawn a lot of the criticism, justifiably so. He puts it on himself. He himself says he's fighting for a job. We'll see whether that's actually the case. But just my take, I think he is overwhelmed by whatever it is he's being asked to do. And again, this will lead into the discussion about more to Cam. Whatever it is, I think he's lost himself completely here, where the position that he's played his entire life now seems like something that he doesn't understand. And it's not just the throws he's not making and the recognition. He's missing opportunities to run for easy first downs with half the field completely open and a defender not within 15, 20 yards. He's not taking what the defense gives him at all. And right now, I think he's really in his own head. So we'll see what happens this week. I think this is a better matchup for them against Buffalo. There's some familiarity there. So hopefully that helps things. But I do want to jump ahead. You mentioned the coaches. Why do you think that hasn't happened yet? At the beginning of the year, there was a lot of talk, Evan, about they're going to run the Patriots offense. There isn't going to be a Cam Newton offense, and everyone thought that made sense. It doesn't make sense anymore. I think they have to not run a full Cam Newton offense, but they've got to meet somewhere in between. Yeah,
I think the biggest thing with the coaching is that we talked so much about option routes and how that's difficult to learn for the receivers and difficult to learn for young guys. That's why N'Keal Harry has struggled, or that's why this guy's not seeing the field. In reality, the optionality of the Patriots offense is far more challenging for the quarterback than it is for the wide receiver, because the wide receiver, it's really simple. If you're an outside receiver in the Patriots system, you're stopping down against off coverage and you're running the fade against press coverage. That's it, right? And for the most part, everything else is pretty much locked. It's not all that much option routes for an outside receiver. For an inside guy like an Edelman, yeah, there's a ton of three-way option type of routes. Stop, sit,
in the zone, right,
go in or go out or whatever. There's a ton of that going on. But they're not asking N'Keal Harry to run the juke series. They're not asking N'Keal Harry to run a branch concept where he can do three different things in the route. That's Edelman's job. So Edelman knows where he's going. I think the biggest issue is that the quarterback, first he has to figure out what the coverage is, right? He's got to read it. Is it too high? Is it single high? Is it zero blitz? What's the coverage system? What's the structure? Once he reads the structure, he needs to then say, okay, I know what the structure is now. So what are the routes converting to? Right. And then he's got to figure out what are the routes converting to. And then he's got to figure out, okay, then where do I go with the football? Right. So that's the issue, is that process for a quarterback like Tom Brady, who's been in the system for 20 years and is a supercomputer human being, he can read those things out extremely quickly. But for a new quarterback in the system who isn't used to reading out option routes at this level, it becomes more complicated. So I actually think that Cam Newton has had the hardest job out of anybody in the Patriots offense to learn this system. And it's way harder for a new quarterback to learn that type of optionality than it is for, let's say, a rookie wide receiver or something like that. The second thing that I'll say about the Patriots offense is that I, quite frankly, have found it extremely bland from a running game, motion, shifting, all that kind of stuff. they're not doing anywhere near as much of that as they used to. So last year in 2019, they were third in the league in pre-snap motion and shifts, running it almost 65% of the time. This year, they're all the way down to 18th, only running it 48% of the time. So now we're not getting the jet motion. We're not getting the misdirection. We're not getting the, okay, let's line up in 21 personnel with the fullback in the backfield. Okay, wait, they're stacking the box. Now let's go 5 wide and see what they give us matchup wise then. All these types of shifts, all these types of motions that they used to utilize so much coverage indicators on top of just, kind of ghost motions and things like that as window dressing for the defense. It's not happening as much for the Patriots right now. So basically what we're seeing is a lot of carries into stacked boxes where they got 7 blockers versus 8 defenders, and they're just trying to double team at the point of attack and churn out 5-6 yards at a time, and it's not productive. I think what we saw out of the 49ers offense, now granted the Patriots don't have anywhere near the speed that the 49ers have at the skill positions, but all the motion, all the jet sweeps, all the misdirection plays, and then you slowly notice that when Kyle Shanahan runs a jet motion to Deebo Samuel, but the next play he fakes the jet motion to Deebo Samuel, all of a sudden those interior rushing lanes are a lot bigger because you got guys on the edges worried about the jet motion, and then it's much easier to hit it up inside, and that's when you can really create explosive plays with just your designed, traditional running game. So I love to see a little bit more motion from the Patriots, a little bit more exotic running schemes when Cam Newton's involved, things like Baltimore has done with escort motions and arc blocks and things that I've written about that we just haven't necessarily seen from this Patriots offense. The second thing I would say would be running backs. The running backs, they are not getting nearly enough out of the running backs in the passing game. The production there is around 6.1, 6.2 yards per attempt. It's just not enough. So on top of screens, and I should also say that all 3 running backs that really catch the ball for the Patriots, Rex Burkhead, James White, and Damian Harris, are averaging negative average depth of target, which means all their throws are coming at or behind the line of scrimmage. So what they need to do offensively with the running backs, in my mind, is get them more vertical up the field. Where are the wheel routes? Where's H-back seam? Where's all these things up the field with the backs against linebackers, mismatches that they can create? Yeah. Maybe James White's situation with his family, and he's kind of been in and out of practice and stuff like that, is contributing to his lack of kind of creativity there. But we've seen a little bit of motion with James White, motion him out wide and run him on a slant and things like that. I would love to see them utilize the running backs as explosive playmakers in the passing game because they don't have explosive playmakers elsewhere. Those are that's the backbone of their offense, and they're just not getting enough out of the running back targets right now.
Yeah, and again, with White, as you said, I mean, this is the reason he's been as successful as he's been over the years. Is you're creating those mismatches, and you're getting him out there in space and on linebackers because a lot of your receivers aren't able to do that. You're not able to find those mismatches otherwise. So White certainly being underutilized at this point. I want to move on from Cam Newton to the other quarterback. Jarrett Stidham, who was the presumptive starter up until the moment Newton was signed. And I saw an interesting stat from your pal over at PFF, Sam Monson. And again, this is something we could look up ourselves, but he tweeted this and I thought it was of interest. Jarrett Stidham has attempted in his career 27 career passes. 13 have been caught by his teammates. 4 of them have been caught by the defense. He has a worse career passer rating than a throwaway. Again, this is a small sample size, and you're putting him in situations here where I don't know if he had the reins for a full game. Is he throwing those picks? I'm not sure there either. Maybe it's just almost preseason mode. Let's just wing it, kids. See what we got. Like, go practice some throws. So it's hard to judge with such a small sample size, but Belichick doubled down on his insistence that Cam Newton is the guy, which I think most people that cover the team would agree at this moment. It does seem like the more prudent thing to do, given that Stidham's not Garoppolo. It doesn't look like he's ready to go, waiting in the wings here, and could take the job, run with it where you'd see any improvement. How much of this decision is based on deference to Cam right now and for all that he's done in the game, and how much of it is that they're terribly concerned that Stidham isn't ready? Because the one thing I wonder, Evan, is while he might not be ready and he might not win you games, if Cam Newton's unable to manage a game and just put them in a position to not lose, because the turnovers right now are outrageous, then you start to wonder whether you do need someone who can just hang on to the ball, right? We don't know that Stidham's that guy. So what do you think the reasoning behind sticking with Newton at this point is?
Well, I think it's twofold. First of all, from everything that we've seen out of Jarrett Stidham, listen, those types of stats, I love my guy Sam, but it does drive me crazy, because what practice preparation has Jarrett Stidham ever really had for an NFL game, right? Has he ever taken snaps with the starters
for the full week leading up? No.
Gone through a week,
game planning for a team,
right?
Yeah, entering a game when you're not trailing by X amount of points and it's basically garbage time. None. You're right. That's why I said take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. So that's, to me, that's one of the biggest misconceptions right now, is that people that say, that kind of scoff at the Patriots and say, damn, they were going into the season with Jarrett Stidham as the starter. Imagine how bad it would be then. Well, we don't really know, because if Jarrett Stidham was going to be the starter back in August, then he would have had all of training camp. Yes, there was games, but he has the entire training camp as the number one quarterback, as QB1, taking all of those reps, taking all those snaps, having the offense curtailed to him, all those types of things. And that hasn't been the case. So I don't think it's very fair. In terms of why they're sticking with Newton instead of going to Stidham, the biggest thing that I have seen out of the sample size that we have to work with out of Stidham, which I just mentioned, is taken with a grain of salt and isn't much. But I think we don't see a much faster processor out of Jarrett Stidham compared to Cam. I would think that the issues that they have with timing and precision and things like that are going to exist with Stidham as well as they do with Cam, because he doesn't see the field much quicker than Newton does. It's not like you mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy's a guy that can see the field quickly, get the ball out quickly, has a quick snappy release, gets the ball out of his hand fast. That's not Jarrett Stidham's game either. So you combine that with the fact that he's not as mobile as Cam Newton, and he can't add that element to the mix. What is he necessarily better at right now than Cam? That's what Belichick said. He said, I think we're going to continue to start Cam because I think he's the best player we have at that position. And I agree with him. He's the best player they have at that position from a totality standpoint. Cam's going to turn the ball over and take a long time to throw. So Jarrett Stidham's going to take a long time to throw the football as well and make decisions with it in the pocket. And his turnover rate is obviously extremely high too. So if he's not going to get the ball out quicker and he's not going to see things faster and keep the offense on time and within structure, and he's not going to be more athletic than Cam Newton, then what is he exactly better at this stage than Cam? And I think the answer is nothing, which is exactly what Bill Belichick said on EEI yesterday when he said Cam's the best player we have at that position, because both of them are maybe a little bit slow mentally. Both of them are not exactly, great at protecting the football right now. And Cam is a much better athlete than Jarrett Stidham is. So, advantage Cam for now.
Yeah. And again, this is a common reaction and the quarterback is one of the few positions you can do this with, because it's one person gets to play it. So if one person isn't playing it, immediately you're going to get a fan base, and a lot of critics say, put in the other guy. But I mean, the other guy's not always better. You may just have to live with mediocrity or substandard play, which was they have right now. I mean, look at what happened in Chicago. Mitch Trubisky puked all over himself early in the year. You put in Nick Foles, he wins you a game. Everyone feels good about it. Foles has been worse than Trubisky was over his first couple of starts over the last 4. So you're right back to the drawing board here. And I think this might be similar to what the Patriots are living with. And I think if you look at the two scenarios, which one can pull themselves up and play at a higher level? And I think that's clearly Cam. Right. So again, for now, you got to stick with it, but you can't have too many more. I mean, it's almost like an NHL goalie. When you let in 7, 8, 9 goals, you got to get him out of there for a little bit. Like Cam can't have another game like he had against San Fran, where football seems like a foreign sport to him. So right. As long as you get past that, again, Cam is probably the guy. And I suspect Buffalo's going to feel about yourself game. We'll see. I want to move on quickly to a huge debate raging on Twitter and between Patriots writers and analysts is the weapons. Okay, and this seems like a really easy debate to solve. Is it Cam or is it the weapons? It's both. Correct. But it feels like you have to fall on one side or the other of this argument, or else it or else you're an idiot and you don't understand football. But really, at the end of the day, certainly, yes, Cam has been demonstrably bad, but does this absolve the receivers from being, not saying you could have the best receivers in the world. If Cam's not able to throw to open guys now, he's not going to be able to throw to even more open guys if the weapons are great. So certainly if the quarterback is broken, that's a problem. But this is still a dreadful collection of pass catchers that the Patriots have now. So if and when Cam does elevate his game and starts seeing the field better, the problem will once again shift back to the weapons.
Yeah, and like I said when we were talking about Cam, nobody is expecting Cam to elevate this group of pass catchers into the 07 Patriots. That's not the expectation here. The expectation is that Cam is going to make the standard system schemed quarterback throws where, a guy like, for instance, a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Kirk Cousins or somebody like that who doesn't necessarily elevate what's around him, but at least he runs the system and he makes the thing run on time and he operates well within structure. That's what the Patriots need at a minimum from their starting quarterback, and that's not what they're getting. Now, back to the weapons, though. To me, there's two things going on here. One of them is how defenses are defending the Patriots and what that says about their weapons. And the second thing is what we're actually seeing on tape as a result of that. So the statistics that I look up, oftentimes I look at them and I say, okay, that makes sense. But what then does the tape say about what's actually happening and what's actually leading to that? So right now, the Patriots are facing either single high coverage or cover zero on 70% of their plays, which is top 5 in the league in frequency. So basically what that means is that defenses are putting one safety up top. They're saying nobody's afraid of anybody on the outside that the Patriots might have one-on-one. We're going to put 7 or 8 guys in the box. We're going to make sure we stop the run. We're going to make sure we bracket Julian Edelman in the middle of the field and force Cam elsewhere. And we're going to live with the targets of Damier Byrd and N'Keal Harry and Jacoby Myers and Ryan Izzo and anybody else. And that's what the defense is telling us about the Patriots offense, is that they have no weapons down the field and no weapons on the outside that scare any defensive coordinators into going too high or to doubling somebody out there or doing anything creative in terms of trying to stop their weapons. So that's one thing. Then the second thing is, and the Patriots, by the way, statistically are absolutely god-awful against single high coverages throwing the football, because that's when we get into the tape of like, why are they god awful if they're giving them these opportunities to win one-on-ones and they're giving them all this space in the deep part of the field? Is it quarterback or is it receivers? And honestly, I feel as though the quarterback's issues are outweighing the receiver issues at this point, because the Patriots are getting those single high looks. And what's ended up happening, okay, maybe there is nobody open down the field, but maybe James White's open in the flat, or maybe he's got a little option route against the linebacker and he wins that route. But Cam is so locked on to Julian Edelman. There's a play on Sunday where Julian Edelman gets cut off in the middle of the field. The Niners rotate into a robber coverage. They cut off Julian Edelman's route. James White is one-on-one on an option route against an edge defender dropping off the line of scrimmage in coverage against your best third down running back on 3rd and 4. And Cam is just so late to it that by the time he throws the ball to James White, A, it's off target. It was low into the inside. Yep. But B, the safety from over the top is going from the middle of the field, post safety, all the way down to the line of scrimmage to get James White, because A, they don't care about Damier Byrd's route on the outside, so they're not worried that the safety needs to be involved. And B, we're already over 3 seconds on the clock already that Cam Newton's been patting the ball in the pocket. So everything's telegraphed at that point, right? So that's, I think, the interesting thing with the single high stuff is that what Cam needs to do is he needs to find his matchup, right? He needs to, okay, they closed the middle of the field. They got the safety rotating into the crosser window to eliminate Julian Edelman, and that's no longer an option. I can't just stare at Julian Edelman for another, a second. I got to move on to something else. And if he had moved on that particular play quicker to James White in the flat, they would have had a first down and they would have moved the chains. Later on in the game, I mentioned already that they threw the interception to Julian Edelman on Hasi Juke. And I said, Hasi Juke against single high, the quarterback's readings seemed to hitch. Cam read it, seemed to juke. There's no reason to do that. That's not sound quarterback play. So I think ultimately what you're seeing is that he's getting locked on to his first read in the progression. The defense is often taking that away because it's very obvious that he's probably going to look to Edelman, or he's probably going to look between the numbers in some facet, and then he's not getting to those option routes quick enough from the running backs out of the backfield to make those effective. So that's a major concern. If you don't throw the ball, if you're a quarterback and the receiver's looking at you when you throw the football, you're already too late. That's the old saying. That's the old coaching saying, right? Yeah. Goes all the way back to Vince Lombardi, and even probably further back than that. That if the receiver is already looking at you when you throw the football, it's too late. And if you go and watch that 3rd and 4 play with James White in the flat, James White is just sitting there waiting for the ball, and it finally comes, and the safety is already all over him.
Yeah. Well, to put a ball in the weapons conversation, again, we've gone a little bit back to Cam and his lack of recognition. One is certainly not helping the other here. But again, if there's any question whether the Patriots' weapons are poor, the team itself has been telling you this for a year and a half, 2 years, when they drafted a receiver in the 1st round, drafted another running back, drafted 2 tight ends this year, went out and signed head case Antonio Brown, or traded for him, devoted money to him, brought back Josh Gordon. They've been telegraphing and telling the world, we do not believe in the current set of weapons that we have, and we need to upgrade them. And if there's any question whether or not this is a substandard group, just look what Tom Brady is doing in Tampa a year after many people had stuck a fork in him. And again, Evan, to be fair on Brady, we were talking about decline. We were starting to see some of this.
If you look back on it, Brady threw for over 4,000 yards last year with the Patriots, right? And he threw 9 interceptions the entire season. Yeah. They've had 10 interceptions in the last 4 games from the quarterback.
And it was still fine. It was still fine by Brady's standards. It was 4,000 touchdowns, a little down, interceptions up. Actually, the year before, I think he had 11 2 years prior. Yeah. But again, his yards per attempt down. Everything was down for Brady, and to the point that we were attributing some of it to he's not the guy who can carry you anymore. Well, I don't know. We might have been wrong there, because you're seeing with an uptick in weapons that he is. I mean, he's dropping dimes out there right now. So again, I don't think we can understate how poor this group of receivers is right now, and how long the Patriots have known it for. The fact that we throw Jacoby Myers out there and it's a revelation, and you put him out there in place of last year's 1st round draft pick, which we're not going to get into Harry again because he's taken enough of a beating, and the poor guy is probably suffering from a concussion right now, and he has a history of them. So everybody hopes that he jumps back in here and he's okay this week. We'll see. I want some quick hit thoughts here, Evan. Can't spend tons of time on all of these, but while we're on Brady, I'll ask you very quickly, the Antonio Brown signing, how did that sit with you? Brady kind of clearly forcing the issue a little bit, despite what the messaging coming out of Tampa is.
Yeah, Brady's always going to side on the side of whatever we can do to win, right? Whatever is the best option for us to win football games. They've been a little bit banged up at that position. I don't love it either, but I'm not going to sit here and bash the guy for it. I think your point, though, about the downfield big-time throws, Brady currently leads the entire NFL in big-time throws. Yeah. And I think that statistic to me is a direct relation to the skill around you, right? Because you're not even going to attempt those types of dimes.
You can confidently attempt and make these throws.
Right, if there's nobody available. So things like big-time throws, contested catches, forced missed tackle rate, and yards after the catch, that's receiver creation. Yeah. In a lot of ways. And that's where the Patriots are extremely lacking, on top of how teams are just not really respecting them at all in terms of their safety usage as well. That's what other teams are telling you about your receivers. So they clearly are struggling there. And it's clear that Brady, now that he has those receivers back, is making those downfield throws again. But again, I still come back to just make the easy ones. Just take the read, take what the defense gives you. Nobody's asking Cam to be Superman.
All right, quick hitters again. Chase Winovich benched. Why? What happened to this guy? We were singing his praises as possibly the front seven, and now situational.
It's shocking. And I asked Bill Belichick about this morning. My first question is, what have you seen out of Chase Winovich as a run defender, thinking that maybe they are taking him off the field in first and second down for that reason. Belichick kind of made it about the entire team and how everybody needs to be better. The second question I asked Belichick was, okay, well, what's the reason why he's not playing as much? Is there a football reason? And Belichick insisted that there was not, that he thinks that Chase Winovich is the same player as he was earlier on in the season, and just game plans, situations, circumstances are just leading to him not playing anymore. When you put Brandon Copeland, no offense, on the field over Chase Winovich, you need to answer to that, in my opinion. Why is that happening? Why is Anthony Jennings and Brandon Copeland playing over Chase Winovich? That one is one I cannot explain.
When you get the answer, tell me also why Malcolm Butler didn't play in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's exactly like that, right? It's not exactly like that.
Right. It defies logic and everything that has preceded it. But now we just have to accept the new reality, which is, I just did what's best for the football team, and then you just have to move on. Again, Jawan Williams really not out there on defense at all. Why do you think that is? Again, special team snaps only, I believe, against San Fran, even though we saw we've seen some good play out of him at times this year.
I think he's another guy that's pretty situational player as well, matchup player. You're probably not gonna put Jawan Williams on George Kittle too often. It's just not a great matchup for the Patriots. So they went more in passing situations with Stephon Gilmore on George Kittle instead. So I think when you look at this Patriots defense and their secondary, because of what they're at with linebacker, they really need those guys, the DBs that are on the field, to be as versatile as possible, be able to do as many different things, play safety, play down, play up, play in the box, play on the outside, inside, everywhere. Guys like Jason McCourty, Jonathan Jones, Stephon Gilmore, all of them do that type of stuff. Guys like J.C. Jackson or Jawan Williams do it less, and I think that's why they see the field less.
Okay, now assuming Jawan Williams can play some, and we do think that he can if given an opportunity, even if it is, he's not as versatile as some of the other cornerbacks. What are the chances the Patriots would look to move a corner here at the deadline? Because it is a position where, and again, the name that's going to keep coming up is Gilmore, because one would think, one, it's the salary, but two, he might net the most, and maybe a contender thinks that they're this away. And if you can get a first rounder for them, it's going to be tough, particularly if they lose this week against Buffalo and the trade deadline's coming up. Trade deadline, by the way, on Election Day. I guess Christmas was occupied, so they decided to do it on November 3rd. But that's coming up. If you lose to Buffalo, you might be sellers. Chance they could sell Gilmore thinking they have enough depth back here.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is that this kind of like there's a little hidden secret here in the NFL, or something that people are kind of not talking about with Stephon Gilmore, and that is that he's really been available via trade since the offseason. I know Albert Breer has continued to put this out there over and over again. There are certain players like a Stephon Gilmore, like a Zach Ertz, that if you give a good enough offer, they've been available forever. They really have been. So they continue to shop Gilmore. They continue to kind of dangle him out there and say, somebody come and get him. And it's really just going to be about if they get blown away by an offer where they want to pull the trigger. The Patriots and Stephon Gilmore have sort of made it clear that they're headed for a divorce. Gilmore's heading into his last year of his contract. He's in his second to last year of his contract right now. He wants an extension. He wants to get paid top dollar. The Patriots are looking at him as a 30-year-old corner that's probably on the downtick instead of the upward, and this is sort of his peak right now, and he's probably on his way down. After that, they're not going to pay him, similarly to the way they didn't pay Darrelle Revis back in the day. So to me, this is heading for a divorce at some point. It's just a matter of when the Patriots pull the trigger on a trade.
Yeah, you signed your deal. We got your best years out of you. I look at it as Gronk to a degree. You signed your deal. You got your best. We got your best years out of you. We're not giving you a raise now that we think you're on the down. The downturn here. So it'll be interesting. This is what's interesting here. And I know I said this as it's a justification to fans to trade somebody when you are out of contention, because it's easier to swallow. But the Patriots will absolutely trade somebody when they believe they're in contention. They've done it with Chandler Jones. They've done it with Jamie Collins. They're not afraid to do that as well. So as you said, Gilmore's been available. I would think whether they're 4-2 or 2-4, if they saw there was a deal there that could be made that was good for the team on the whole in the future, they would make it. So I think to people at home, don't just look at this they might be buyers or sellers here. I think Tooney would be another one as well, but whether or not you can net anything higher than a third rounder for him is questionable. So chances are you ride it out with Tooney into the offseason, and then he goes. I don't know if you disagree with that, but I think that's where that goes. Last thing I'll ask you, Damian Harris, what we've seen so far has been good. Positive, definitely running with more explosion. Whether or not Sony can inch back into the picture when he's off IR, we'll see. But why do you think they didn't commit to the run, or why? At this point, I don't understand Rex Burkhead. Let's put it this way: I understand James White. I don't understand Rex Burkhead anymore. I get spelling a stud back. If you have two backs, I get the 66-33 split. 2 series on, 1 off, keep them fresh. I don't understand, if you're going to be using White situationally, why Harris is coming off the field at all, and why they're not forcing 20 carries on it at this point.
I think the biggest thing with the running game that I come back to is that as good as they can be in terms of their offensive line, just dominating the other team, when you're running against heavy boxes all the time and doing it from an under center perspective, it's difficult to continue to carve out explosive plays just by running, a double team here with the fullback leading through the backfield, or power with the pulling guard, or counter, or whatever scheme the Patriots have used over the years. There's just not a ton of space inside, and it's not because the blocking is bad. The blocking is still great, but you're just not going to move that many bodies at the NFL level that far out of those rushing lanes. So again, to me, with the running game and making it more explosive and more dynamic comes from that motion thing. They need to start adding some jet motion, some deception, some different wrinkles to their quarterback runs. They ran some power read, maybe a couple of zone read plays against San Francisco that were successful, but not overly successful. I think what you need to see out of this Patriots running game is that they need to be more creative, more dynamic, and really realize that they need to use it as a way to move the football, like other teams might use their passing game to move the football. And in order to get that many yards out of it, they need to be more creative and spice it up a little bit. That's the simplest way to put it, is to really spice it up a little bit, get a little bit more creative with the motion, hit them with some jet motion, hit them with some different types of misdirection, and try to get these guys into space a little bit more. So it's not just, 5 yards in a cloud of dust. It's not just guys, inside the trenches just kind of going to war. They have to be able to create bigger rushing lanes. They have to get more out of that. And finally, it's related, but not exactly related. The play action passing game has been a real problem for them, especially from under center. I think this also ties to some things with Cam. A lot of the play action passing game is predicated on the quarterback really selling that fake. And right now, I just don't see Cam getting those linebackers up the line of scrimmage in the same way that they have in the past. So it's just a lot. If you can't run the football in a dynamic fashion, and you can't then generate explosive plays off of play action, and those 21 personnel sets with the fullback become less and less and less efficient.
Well, that's about as much as we can stuff into one game's worth of
There's a lot of problems to talk about. So
that's the thing. I honestly think we left some on the table. We have not gotten deep into the defense, and there are problems all over the place there. They're basically playing with no linebackers at this point. But again, you ranked Gilmore problem 15. Again, the defense right now is not the thing that stands out the most. Obviously, all the focus is going to be on the offense and what comes this week. Evan will have another episode of Patriots Beat later in the week, as it will start to preview the Bills and a matchup which really is really at this point is a must win for the Patriots. So we'll start looking into that as the week goes on. Follow everything from Evan Lazar on clnsmedia.com. Check out our YouTube channel, Patriots Press Pass as well. And of course, subscribe to this podcast, The Patriots Beat, presented by betonline.ag. Subscribe, rate, review. Go do it right now if you haven't already. Evan Lazar, thanks a lot.